Good afternoon, HughesSecCon. Welcome back to our Track 7 lineup. It is my pleasure to introduce Larry Maccherone with Contrast Security, talking about his transformation blueprint for developer-centric application security. Here's Larry.
Thanks, David. And David is looking for a pen testing job, so, you know, public service announcement here. So, the beatings will continue until morale improves. Is that going to work? What do you think? Not really. No. That's commonly attributed to William Bligh, who's a real British naval commander, and it's written up in the book, The Mutiny on the Bounty. He actually never really officially, they think he never really said this. It was actually an American naval officer who said this line, and it just somehow, of course, you know, got attributed to those evil British naval officers. So, when I do this slide in London, they give me hisses when I say that, but it's kind of fun. Anyway, so this is kind of how we think of AppSec today. We often get the development engineers to throw their product over the wall to the security folks, the pen testers, who evaluate it, and the pen testers call their baby ugly, and they expect the developers and them to have a good relationship after that. And it doesn't actually really work very well. And I have a little more detail as to why that doesn't work, the psychology of it. But I'm going to spend most of my time today talking about what can you do instead that would actually be a more healthy way to lead a ship to success in military combat, or to engage between security and engineering. So people often refer to me as that I do couples counseling between security and engineering, but I'm going to give you a little bit more of my real background here. There's some logos that are going to come up there that have to do with my background. I'm not going to go into each and every one of them, but some of them may be familiar to you. There's two things I'd really like you to know about me, because it helps explain where I'm coming from. One, I was the head of AppSec for Comcast for 5 years. 10,000 members of development teams. Most people think of Comcast in the US as that cable company, but you know, people also sort of vaguely know, oh, there's NBC, and there's Universal Studios, and there's the parks, and there's Peloton, most people don't associate with Comcast, and there's DreamWorks, which fewer people than Universal, but there's also Sky, and there's 60% of all television ads, regardless of whether they run on Comcast networks or not, go through Comcast's ad placement system. On and on and on. A lot of development at Comcast. And over the course of 5 years, I basically transitioned away from this, the beatings will continue until morale improves, throw it over the wall, gatekeeping, cajoling style of doing AppSec, to one where the developers took more ownership of the security of the products that they were building. And they were trustworthy of that ownership. So I'm going to give you that blueprint, basically that model that we built at Comcast to accomplish this. The second thing I'd like you to know about me is that I'm an active developer. I write code almost every day. I was not writing code this morning, but I did write code on the airplane yesterday. I'm the primary author of a dozen open source projects, one of which gets 1 million downloads a month. Is considered critical infrastructure by the US government because it's used by every cryptocurrency exchange and wallet, as well as all the cloud vendors, GCP, Azure, etc. The government writes me a embarrassingly small check every year to make sure that library does not become a vector for a supply chain attack. So instead of relying on the government paying me, I think what I will do in retirement is, since it's used by every cryptocurrency exchange and wallet, I will inject a vulnerability into it so that I can steal everyone's Bitcoin, and I'll retire to an island without extradition to the United States. So, no, just kidding, of course. Yeah, don't mean it. I do currently work for Contrast Security. Contrast Security was one of a dozen vendors that we had. We had pretty much every AppSec tool vendor's product in the environment at Comcast. You can imagine after acquisitions and things like that, that it's basically flooded with tools. And when I left Comcast, I got job offers from most of them, many of them that any of them that I wanted an offer from. And I chose Contrast because, hey, Jimmy, I chose Contrast because it was the tool that the teams had the most success with. And so that's why I'm at Contrast. I'm not going to talk about Contrast much until maybe the last slide if there's time, but I'm going to talk about sort of everything around the tool that you need to do to be successful with AppSec, especially with developers being more engaged. So the first challenge you have to overcome is the mindset problem. And so I have several different ways of characterizing this mindset problem. And this lesson is essentially one of the ways of characterizing the problem, is that this idea of cajoling and gatekeeping and policy enforcement. So cajoling means essentially begging people to do things that for you instead of them doing it for them, doesn't scale. And it's actually worse than that. It's often more harming. Of course it doesn't scale because the pace of development has been accelerating and is continuing to accelerate, and there's no way that throw it over the wall kind of approach will keep up. But I think there's some bigger problems with this approach that are less talked about. It's time-consuming and soul-crushing work. So imagine your job is to call somebody else's baby ugly all day long. Literally, somebody else's baby ugly. You work in a hospital and you call their baby. Would that be fun? That'd be a fun job. I mean, it's essentially what you're doing if you're serving in a pen testing role or a throw it over the wall kind of role in a traditional AppSec program. Do you think people like hearing that their baby is ugly? They don't like it either. The worst thing about this, though, is that the people who do like calling somebody's baby ugly all day long are the ones that stay in that role. And so you end up with a culture that forms in vulnerability management teams that is corrosive in a lot of ways. And the people who can't stand doing that all day long because it's soul crushing, they move on fast. And so you end up with a negative culture there. Policy enforcement is confrontational. At best, what you get is people saying, what's the minimum I can do to get you to stop bothering me, okay? I mean, it's a checkbox answer. And that sometimes might be effective, but often it's not effective. It's just checking a box, but not actually doing the thing that is effective. The policies themselves have problems. They're often out of context. They often sort of assume a context of an older way of doing development because the policies have been around a lot longer, and development has evolved more rapidly than traditional cyber has evolved. So the people doing the auditing that aren't the ones that enjoy calling people's baby ugly all day know this, and because they've gotten this feedback from developers. So they selectively enforce parts of the policy and don't selectively enforce other parts. Well, that gives you this broken window effect. If I can ignore these policies, why do I have to pay attention to any of them? So this doesn't work for that reason as well. So, and if you do full audits, they're too much information, they're often depressing, and nobody knows where to start, and it doesn't really help. So what do we need to do instead? Well, a lot of security leaders recognize everything I just said, and particularly that traditional ways of doing AppSec have not kept up with development. But their quick one-sentence solution idea also is ineffective. So they often believe that if we can create more relevant and consumable policies, that would fix the problem. So my nominal boss when I was at Comcast, I really was longtime friends with the CISO, and she was the one who hired me, and I effectively reported to her. But he was the guy that sort of signed my expense reports, was this guy named Chris. And he really wasn't an AppSec person. He was essentially chief of staff. He knew how to work the systems at Comcast. He didn't really know anything about AppSec. His last job before he became moved over to cybersecurity was essentially to run the change control board And anyway, so he was not deep into the content of what we were doing, but he did get himself involved in two things while I was there. One was rewriting the policies. So he hired a consulting firm, paid $1 million for them to take our 300-page policy manual, which was being largely ignored, and to rewrite it, referencing all these things like OpenSAM and the OWASP model, et cetera. And the new policy manual came out, after months of investing in this and $1 million later, and they're like, "Oh, Larry, can you double check this so that you can advocate for it to the developers and you can clean up." And they just wanted like wording corrections, and basically it was no better than the thing that came before it. It had all the same old problems with the thing that came before it. So a few years later, he said, "Okay, that didn't work. Let's pay another big effort." This time he didn't want to spend $1 million, so he had interns do it. And he said, "Take this thing that we spent $1 million on and make it tweetable. Make each of the policies fit in 140 characters." And he thought that would fix the problem. And of course, that didn't fix the problem. The problem was that the policies were just written with assumptions that were no longer true. It was too big, and it wasn't prioritized. They often believe you can get better at enforcing the policies. Well, it's just those damn developers ignoring us. If we just put some teeth to it, it'll really work. That's the beatings will continue until morale improves. The best case scenario there is they ignore you. The worst case scenario is they leave in that situation. What if we just gamify the whole thing, metrics-based incentives? Now, this is a pretty good idea, and I'm going to show you an example of how to do this successfully here in a little bit. But that alone, all by itself, doesn't actually work. And they often come up with metric systems that don't actually result in the right behaviors. Oh, it's just a matter of training. It's just, if we can just train developers, that they just don't know how to do AppSec. If we can just train them how to do AppSec, then it'll get better. That doesn't solve the problem, although that is helpful and important. I did do a study, though. I published a study at the RSA conference in 2020 where I analyzed the efficacy of 5 different AppSec training programs. 3 of those 5 programs were net negative impact, meaning that the teams that had gone through the training had worse security outcomes than the teams who hadn't gone through the training. The other 2 were successful, and then we built on those. But the average AppSec program does more harm than good. If we just hug it out, we just collaborate better, kumbaya, this doesn't work either. If we just buy new tools. Now, I work for a tool vendor, so of course we like this answer, but it doesn't always work. It's sort of like saying, I'm going to learn how to ski. I've never skied before, and I'm going to go out, and the first thing I'm going to do is spend $3,000 on the best competitive ski equipment I could possibly. The $3,000 ski equipment is no better than the $300 ski equipment for the beginner. In fact, it might be worse than the $300 one. Now, when you get to the point of high maturity, or even moderate maturity, an improvement in equipment could improve your ability to ski. But I think most folks are at the point where they don't even really know how to do the basics right of using tools effectively. And I think that's the problem, is not the tools themselves for the most part. So a lot of these can help, but we need a systematic approach. And that's what this transformation blueprint is a systematic approach to how you would go about overcoming this mindset problem. So a little bit of sales on this process just before I get into the details of it, so you stick around and listen to the details of the process. We did this, and I was super adamant about measuring the effectiveness of it. We measured this by using real risk reduction outcomes. We didn't measure it by measuring activity. We found 50,000 vulnerabilities. No, that was not a measure we used. How many incidents were there in production? How many vulnerabilities were found in production by production level pen testing or purple teaming? Those were the things that we measured, that we compared efficacy to. The teams that went halfway through my program had 1/6 as many vulnerabilities found in production as the teams that hadn't been. In addition to that, it was roughly the same reduction improvement the team we had before information, before they entered my program, and after. And there was also roughly a 6-to-1 reduction in vulnerabilities. And the cost to run my program at Comcast was 1/4 the cost to run the traditional vulnerability management, pen testing oriented, threat modeling oriented program. And we didn't get rid of pen testing and threat modeling. We used those in a different way in the new program. But the investment made in those things, they were relying almost completely on those, and they were not very effective because of the cadence and for other reasons. So every year, I basically asked the CISO, the vulnerability management team over there, which started out with 40 headcount when I started working there. When I left, they had 0 headcount because every year I said, he has 5 open slots. Get rid of those 5 open slots and give me 1 new coach, or 4 open slots, give me 1 new coach. And coaching is one of the techniques I'll talk about sort of at the heart of this program here. So very effective. By the time I got to 157 teams and I published that paper at the RSA conference, the CISO had basically become convinced that the old way of doing AppSec needed to disappear at Comcast, and they said, we're winding that down and we're going to make every engineering team go into this way of doing it. So it was a competitive program. You could either be in the program or not in the program before, and by the time I left, they had basically mandated that all the teams transition into this program. That's when I decided I accomplished my goal and it's time for me to move on. Okay, so what do I mean by developer-centric app and API security? So a lot of times that people use this phrase DevSecOps, and it can be thought of, it can be advertised as DevOps lipstick on a traditional security pig. That's not what I mean. What I mean is these 3 sections here. That's my definition, this 3-part definition. First of all, it's empowered product teams, engineering teams, including the product leadership, taking ownership of the security of their products and being worthy of being trusted with the ownership of the security of their products. They do it in a DevOps way. And so DevOps, to me, is not just the use of a CI/CD tooling, which is a necessary element to it, but it's not sufficient. It's really more about these cultural elements of flow, which systems thinking is the new terminology for what Gene Kim originally put out as flow, feedback, and a culture of experimentation and learning. It's these cultural things. These are the keys to DevOps. So you got to have that culture aspect of doing development. And you have to do security in the same sort of way that matches these cultural ways of thinking, and also with the tools in a CI/CD-ish way as well. But you never forget the bottom line. And this is where a lot of people go wrong in security evangelism. It's not sec DevOps, because security does not come first. If you have no customers, you don't need any security, right? It's DevSecOps. You have to build the product, and you have to never forget that the developers are there to produce value for your company in the form of working software. And if you do something that slows that down, it better be temporary, and it better have a net gain that is equal to the cost of that slowdown. You can't just say, oh, security is important and leave it at that. You have to actually make a trade-off discussion, be willing to engage, and be effective at winning in a trade-off discussion about the efficacy of doing something for security versus doing something to help development go faster. Okay, so I said that the OWASP list and the Open SAM list and the PCI list they're insufficient. They're too big. They're too unwieldy. They're not prioritized enough. So what do you do instead? Well, you need to identify, and I'm using this term practices, and it's really important. So policies have this connotation that you can be audited against them, and so they're negative, right? So why would I want to read a policy manual? It's like, oh, it's a negative thing. It's already got that connotation. Even process, even just saying SDLC, Software Development Lifecycle Process is sometimes aspirational. It's often defined centrally, and it's not necessarily every development team follows that whole process in the organization. Although processes are pretty good, it's a much better statement than policies in terms of how it feels. But it also doesn't necessarily capture the vibe of what I'm getting at. Practices sort of hits the right sort of just right Goldilocks for me, and because it's what you actually do. A practice is what is actually done. And the emphasis is on doing it, not talking about it, not documenting it, not being audited against it. It's on doing it. How do you practice the development of software? And so how do you pick the right practices? So I'm using the word practices, and I've said they're roughly equivalent to what most people think of as policies. But they're worded in a different way, and they're positioned in a different way. How do you come up with this practice list that aligns with your policy manual? Well, I've got an approach for doing that. But don't just borrow it from NIST and SANS and OOP. They don't all say the same thing. They target security specialists. They fail to adapt to developers. And there's too many of them. They're overwhelming. They're not prioritized, and I'm going to give you how to prioritize them in a little bit. And they fail to consider your company's unique context. You know, what's important for a fintech or a medical device manufacturer might be completely inappropriate for a game developer, for instance. So you want to develop them yourself. Don't just accept pre-canned lists of policies and practices. Come up with your own list. Now, the result of that will be, well, a little more work, but I can facilitate that for you. I have a half-day workshop that accomplishes this. If we do it on site, if we do it remote, it's about a week, an hour and a half session, 3 sessions. We come out with, and I'll show you an example of it in a little bit here, a practices list. And I'm going to show you that example so you know what it looks like. Yeah, so here's the example list of practices that I use. Now, the font's really small intentionally because this is an example. Now, I happen to like this list because, you know, every time I do this workshop, and I've done it maybe 30, 40 times now, it comes out 2/3 the same in terms of the bullets that are on it. So I think it's a pretty good summary of the average one that comes out of it. It's usually shorter out of the half-day workshop and the 1-week workshop. It's usually 8, maybe max of 12. This is 13. But so this is sort of like a superset almost of the good ones that I've done. And the weightings are wildly different every time I do that. So I don't want to go through the details of each and every one of these and talk about them. I could do a whole talk on just that. And in fact, that RSA recording from 2020 is essentially that, including the section about the training programs. So if you Google Maccherone RSA on YouTube, you'll come up with that talk if you want to see all of that content. Now, I've fundamentally changed the list since that. That was 3.5 years ago. But I am going to talk about the characteristics of this list that I think are universal, and this is what we're shooting for every time we develop this practice list. First of all, it starts with non-security practices. So when we host this workshop, who do we invite to the workshop? Do we just invite the security leadership to the workshop? No. We make sure that, and this is really important the way I'm about to word this, we make sure that the top 3 to 5 most respected engineers in the organization are in the room when you do this practice development. Here, for 2 reasons. The obvious reason is the list will be much better. It'll be worded in ways that developers will understand. It will take into account not just the context of the way the average development team at that organization operates, but it'll also anticipate the future direction that they want to move the organization, the engineering organization in. Because a lot of folks in engineering are trying to adopt DevOps more aggressively, and then they're trying to get more mature in DevOps. They know the future state that they're shooting for, and they want the practices that they define for security to align as much with the current state as with the future state. But the more important reason is you're starting the sales process with those 3 to 5 most respected engineers. This is usually not the VP of engineering or the CTO unless they're writing code still. It's usually the tech leads of the 3 to 5 crown jewel projects in the organization. And these are the people everyone looks up to, all the other engineers look up to. Those engineers, when this new practice list is going to come out, that they're going to ask them, is this another thing from security that we can just ignore? Or do we actually really need to pay attention to this one? They're going to say, I was in the room when we wrote that. Half of them were essentially came from our engineering vision. This is not just one of those things we can ignore. This is something we really want to do. And so you get that advocacy, you get that internal sales sort of going for that. The other thing is that these practices are not a comprehensive list of engineering practices, that these four that I've got listed here, of all of the practices that engineering leadership wants every engineering team to be doing. But they're the 4 that are prerequisites for doing security in an efficient and effective manner. That's really the only ones we want to pull out and put in this document. It also sends the message that you can't do great security without great engineering, and the security organization is going to be the strongest advocates for engineering excellence at the organization. And so that's the reason we start with non-engineering practices. The meat of it is practices that can be done by the development team. The second most important element of this is that they're weighted. So you can see here, and let's see if I can get the pointer working. You see here there's 12% assigned to critical clean for third-party code you import, aka SCA, SBOM, et cetera. So this is a shorthand for you have removed all of the critical severity vulnerabilities that were found by software composition analysis or SBOM tools, and you've put a blocker in place in the pipeline so you can never have those things get into production again in the future. That's what critical clean means. That's worth 12 points. Well, how difficult would it be for the team to get to critical clean? That's an evaluation that the development team will have to make. Well, let's run the tool once and see how many we have. Oh, we have 5 criticals. Let me go look at one of them. Yeah, we could do those in a sprint or 2. And you make the goal be less than a sprint or 2. You pare it down so the goal is less than a sprint or 2, typically. That's worth 12 points. High clean is worth, and the critical clean for the code you write, like SQL injection, not third-party library vulnerabilities, but the ones your own custom code have. That's also 12 points. And it's 7 points for getting to high clean for SCA and 7 points for getting to high clean for first party. Now, companies weight these differently, and so this is my example, but you get to decide on the weighting yourself. So if you add that up, that's 34 plus 14, what's that? 24 plus 14, that's 38% of all the weightings. So yeah, 38% of the whole thing is about the use of tools. So, but it's the way you word it for the use of tools. Actually, some of the other ones relate to the use of tools as well. But we have the points on them so you can gamify improvement. When I say gamify improvement, I'll get to that in a little bit. I'll describe that a little bit. So notice how you get no points for running the scanning tool. Now, often that's a milestone that security teams claim. We got SAST implemented across 300 applications. Aren't we great? How much resolution of the findings from those SAST tools did you get? So the bottleneck with the use of these tools is not finding new vulnerabilities. The bottleneck is in resolving them. If you look at the curve of going up and to the right, for vulnerability findings, and you look at the slope of the line for the number that are resolved, the one of findings is running away from the one of resolving in almost every chart like that I look at for just about every organization. That means your security posture is getting worse and worse. The problem is not in finding vulnerabilities, it's in resolving them. So you want the emphasis on resolving them. We also have a gentleman in the room here, Eitan, former head of product development for AppScan, now has a startup called mob.ai that is essentially focused on automating the resolution, the fixing of vulnerabilities. We're partnered with another company named Pixie, a few former founders of of Contrast actually have done something similar, the competitor of yours, Eitan. So we're definitely on board with this. You don't get points for running the tool. You only get points for resolving the findings from the tool. The next criteria is a shallow on-ramp. So I could have just said, you want to be clean for critical and high, no matter what the tool is, for all the tools. But that would then be one big 38-point thing, and nobody would get any points until they did all of that. So we want to give them a chance to get points sort of shallowly, and I'll describe a little bit later how we use the points. So I mentioned we host a workshop. I mentioned that the engineering leadership is in the room. I'm not going to go through this workflow here. It's in the slides. You can ask for them. But this is essentially the step-by-step for the workshop. The bottom two steps are a circle there, are a loop, because we try the draft list of practices out on real development teams. Usually the development teams of the engineering leaders that were in the room. You know, they're the tech leads of the projects, and they usually say, let's try it out. And then we learn, and we get feedback, and it's this rapid feedback that aligns very well with the culture of experimentation and learning vibe for DevOps as well. Okay, so what do you do with this list when you have it? You do coaching. Now, does anyone recognize this figure right here? Who is that? Yeah, so his name is Ted Lasso. Give us that background. Yeah, so American football coach.
Went to the UK and decided to coach a British soccer team, knowing nothing about soccer.
Never even played soccer, and he was put in charge of a European League soccer team, Premier League soccer team. So, how do you do? So he wasn't good at soccer, but he was really good at coaching. What is coaching? Coaching basically says, I don't care where you are right now. I don't care how mature, how good a soccer player you are right now. I'm going to give you motivation and an approach to improving not just your own skills, but your ability to work with others and the ability of the team to work together effectively. And so that's the kind of person, not the folks that like to call your baby ugly, this I believe kind of person that you want in this role. The first 3 coaches I hired at Comcast were not people with any AppSec experience prior to them. They were all Scrum Masters. They were basically doing coaching of development team processes already. And I gave them that list of practices, and they shadowed me till they learned how to repeat them and understand what that list of practices meant. And they're smart people, so they pick it up pretty quickly. But then they helped teams to gamify and improve over time with that. So the coaches, basically, this is the fundamental rule for coaches. Nobody is ever made to feel bad for their current state. That is a firing offense in the program, essentially. The only thing people are made to feel bad for, and you're not going to intentionally try to make them feel bad for, but the gamification system will be designed to essentially show that they're not doing what's expected of them, is a failure to improve. So there's red and amber on that page there. So there's no red or amber on the self-assessment evaluation that is part of this program. It's just shades of green. Because when you don't have red, and you just have it's white or a light shade of green, you just haven't gotten to it yet, or that you just aren't doing it at a mature level. That has a completely different vibe to folks. You know what happens when you put red or amber marks on their report card? They will lie to get around it. They will try to hide the problems from you. That never leads to a healthy coaching relationship here. So these are the shades of green, and there's the progression of maturity for each practice, I should say. Thoughts to words to actions to culture. And the darkest shade of green was for culture, and that means you're doing it basically for every reasonable opportunity that you could do it for it. And there's a blue NA or unknown as well in the visualization. So this graphic looks similar to the other workflow on the other page, but it's completely different words. So I host a workshop with security leadership and engineering in the room. That was the other workflow. This is the workshop between the coach and the single development team. This is the flow. The key person to invite to this call is not the engineering leadership like it was for the first workshop. The key person to invite to this call is the business person, the product owner. Because when I implemented this system at Comcast at first, we only had about a 40% success rate, meaning the practices that the teams committed to adopting in the next 90 days, they only successfully accomplished somewhere a little bit north of 40% of the time. And we went and did analysis to try to figure out why they weren't achieving, this all the time. And it was almost always the business wouldn't let us do it. There's no funding for that. We had roadmap items we had to do. We couldn't get around to it. By having the business people be in the room, and we literally would have to cancel the meeting and reschedule it because they wouldn't show up sometimes. But once the word got out that that's what we would do, then they started showing up. But they would be in the corner and grumpy, and they'd be doing their email and working on their spreadsheets to do their project plans, and they would be, mostly ignoring what was going on. But then I would say, okay, at the end of this workshop, we're going to ask you to commit to adopt 1 to 3 practices to turn to green in the next 90 days. They perk up. They're like, wait a second, nobody commits to anything for this team but me. And so they start engaging and they start paying attention. Then at the end of the workshop, you basically go around the room and you say, do you support this plan, to each and every individual in the room separately? Sort of like, I need a verbal confirmation from you if you're in the exit row on the airplane, if you've ever experienced that. And you start with the business person. Do you support this plan? Meaning you're going to do everything in your power to see the team achieves the goals it set for itself in this meeting in the next 90 days. And they say, no, I don't support this plan. We got all these roadmap items to get out. But what could we modify about the plan such that you would support it? Now, the commitment from engineering leadership is that you're going to do 1 to 3. So don't go below that. But you say, well, let's just do the team wanted to sign up for 3 goals and 2 stretch goals. Let's just do 2 of those 3 goals, and let's only do 1 of them for the top 3 products in the that the team is working, the new products, and we'll ignore the old ones. Are you going to ignore the old ones forever, team? Yeah, I think we can safely ignore the old. Okay, great. We'll record that as you'll get full credit for it if you do that. It's sort of a negotiation, but it's a pre-negotiation. Now, I'm going to document this. I'm going to share it with your leadership, the product leadership, and it's going to go up on a public report that this is what the team signed up for. And if they fail, everyone will know that one of the possible reasons to fail is that the business wouldn't let them do it. And so this is a way to sort of pre-negotiate. After I did this, the success rate went up into the 90s. This is a visualization that sort of visualizes the adoption. It's just shades of green. How dark green it is how good you are. And the pie slices are the different practices. There's 11 practices around this ring. We had the essential 11 at Comcast, and this was a visualization at Comcast from about 4 or 5 years ago. Excuse me. So the ARCs are separate teams. So this is a 10 development team business unit that this is a visualization for. So the visualization for the individual team is this tabular view, but the visualization for multiple teams is that radar chart-like thing. So both of these visualizations are in one of my open source projects called transformation.dev Blueprint. It's an open source tool that essentially allows you to put in your practices and weight them, and it'll gamify the whole thing, create leaderboards. And that's the key, is the leaderboards are the key. The top 3 teams to get the most improvement in the last 90 days get on the leaderboard for most improved. And then the teams that have the highest score overall are on the overall. But you emphasize the improvement leaderboard for the first few years. So I'm skip through a few things fast. You can sign up for a beta when it's open beta available. It's in private alpha right now. So if I do the consulting and do the launch workshop for you guys, you'll have access to the tool. But that's the only way to get the access to the tool until we go open beta with it. I'm going to skip this because I'm running low on time. But I work for Contrast. This is code to sort of explain to you sort of how contrast works and embeds inside the application. This slide is about code. If you want a rundown of this, you can follow me to the booth afterwards, and we'll be glad to show you sort of how contrast works. But the next slide is essentially a summary slide of what contrast does. It basically can replace your SAS tools, your SCA tools, your DAS tools. It can even sort of partially replace some of the functionality of a WAF as well. And this is all one tool. It's not a suite of tools that have been cobbled together. It's one thing you install. It's one thing to manage, and you get all this functionality to replace all that other functionality, basically by doing this one thing. We cost a little more than any one of those tools. We're a little bit harder to implement than any one of them, but we're a lot more effective than any one of them at any one of those things except for the WAF part. But the SCA and the SAST and the DAS part were better than any of those tools in that category. But we're less expensive and less work to implement and maintain than any two of those tools combined. And you get to do it all in one UI and with one rollout effort. That's one of the reasons I loved it so much at Comcast. So we have it broken down into application security testing and application detection and response. The top two are really for pre-prod, and the bottom two are really for prod. But again, follow me to the booth afterwards, and I'll be glad to sort of describe that a little more to you. So things to do after this. We got a minute for, I think, time for one question, maybe a couple. So we'll do that in a second. I mentioned the booth. We're at booth number 109, which is roughly in the center of the exhibit hall there. We're definitely on the center aisle there. You could basically, there's no charge for the transformation workshop. There's no commitment to buy from Contrast if you do, but I will host those for anyone who wants. Please feel free to ask me to come in and do this for you and for your organization. Please connect with me on LinkedIn if you want the slides. There might be a way to get them through the Hughes SecCon, but I actually haven't sent them. But if you ask for them on LinkedIn or you come to the booth and ask for them, then we'll definitely provide you with the slides with either of those two ways. Okay, so we have time for questions. Any questions? Somebody's got a microphone to walk around the room. Is that true? Okay. So question back here. Those criteria aren't discriminators that sort of cause me to not pick contrast. I basically, all of that still, contrast is still great for all of that. The two criteria for using contrast when I was running the program at Comcast were A, that the contrast supported that language and framework. Now, in the Java world, there's not a lot of diversity of frameworks. .NET is even less diversity. We support essentially 99% of Java and .NET development. In the Node world, it's like a new framework comes out every few months, you know, and there's dozens of them that are in use. And some of them we haven't kept up with, like Next.js, for instance. We have no support for Next.js. So if you're a Node shop and you do everything in Next.js, sorry, we won't be able to sort of help you with that. So that's one of the criteria. The other criteria, though, is a little more fuzzy, and you can overcome this one a little bit easier. Can't rewrite your app in a different technology as easily. Is that you have to exercise the app in order for our product to do its job. You can't just point it at a source code repo. So you have to have some level of automated testing or some sort of pattern of manual testing, or you have to get the developers to do desk checks while they're writing the code, or you have to have the feedback from production use. So you need some way of getting the app to be exercised. So those are the two criteria for using contrast successfully. So, other questions? We're at time. I can actually let's call it then. And I'm gonna walk to the booth now. So thank you.